think the hardest part about this journey of creating this documentary has been just the fact that I have had to challenge myself. Um, I'm always coming up with a lot of different ideas and a lot of different things to do, and I often don't finish a lot of the things that I set out to do, and so this was really important to me personally to finish this big project of this documentary, The Schools We Deserve. But it it challenged me to try new things, to get outside of my comfort zone, and that's been a big goal of mine um, moving forward. So I've also had this journey as a professional, learning about some alternatives to education, and looking at how we can design spaces differently, how to approach classroom management and incorporate more wellness and well-being. So I've learned a lot that way, but I've also learned a lot about myself personally and what I'm capable of and how I can look at things differently. And as I went on this journey, I spent a lot of time reflecting, but also I've had to embrace failure a little bit, where, yeah, maybe certain episodes I created, certain things I worked on, maybe didn't go the way that I had intended or had planned. And that was a really interesting dynamic while working on this and seeing my growth over time in my skills, but also in my ideas. But it was really cool because I got to document that journey. So that was really important and special for me, because that's a major belief that I have about schools and classrooms, is that they need to be able to allow you to grow and embrace failure and document that growth. And so I've seen my skills get better and better over time. So for me, I want to look at it more of the process and the journey than looking at the end product. So it was cool to incorporate some of the things that I believe need to be incorporated into schools and classrooms, and also incorporating that into the journey of making this. And that has been a motivator for me. That at times when I wanted to give up, at times when I found things to be difficult, or times where I came across a roadblock or a challenge and I had to adapt, or, like, for example, a big thing was with a lot of the wildfire smoke that we've been experiencing here in Calgary and in Alberta and across the country. That delayed some filming days. So then I had to quickly think and adapt. How can I do an outdoor education filming and do it inside my house, but still have it tap into the essence of outdoor education, and also incorporating wellness into my approach. So it's been such a interesting journey where, like I said, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about motivation and figuring out what works well, what doesn't. I've learned a lot about how I operate, and that was really cool. It was a great chance to challenge myself, but also kind of take an accumulation of things from the past 6, almost 7 years for me. When I did my degree in communications and journalism, I learned so many different storytelling skills, and I worked on a lot of projects, but nothing of this size and magnitude. So it was really cool to be able to use those skills and put those to the test and challenge myself. But to also use a lot of the things that I've learned while pursuing my Bachelor of Education and incorporating and giving myself a little bit of grace as I work through this process, but also making sure that I'm planned and organized and that I am thinking about different perspectives. So it was really cool to take all of that learning and combine everything for me to do this. And I hope one day I look back on this journey and I watch these episodes and these things, and I hope that I do have a time where I laugh a little bit and I reflect on where I'm at. And for me, it's really cool because as a young person, as a young educator, I'm right now full of so many different ideas and fresh perspectives. And I want to carry on with this reflective nature that I've built, and also this passion for outdoor education and land-based learning, and take that forward with me for the rest of my career. So by documenting this, I have something that I can look back on, that I can refer to and be like, wow, at this point in my life, I was so passionate about this. And hopefully it serves as a reminder to kind of keep going, to pursue, and to kind of incorporate exposure to this and all of these different ideas and different learning philosophies and perspectives that I have accumulated and have come across over the last few years. So for me, it's been a big personal journey. I've spent a lot of time reflecting, also a lot of time doing a lot of reading, a lot of checking out different diverse sources, and it's just, there's so many amazing things and so much information that supports a lot of the things that I've been working on. For me, it has always come down to exposure when you think about outdoor education. So on a personal note, I've really spent the last few years getting back outside and reconnecting with nature. I didn't realize that my relationship with nature was so important to me and so vital to my well-being. It has always been a big part of my life, and I think it definitely took the pandemic and the last few years for me to realize how important that relationship is for me. And now that I've been on this journey of reconnecting, it has provided me with this additional perspective that it is easier said than done. I think for me, I know that outdoor education and just being outside in general really supports my learning, my mental health. When I go for a 10 to 15 minute walk, my mood has a complete 180. I know by spending so much time outside, especially in the last year, what types of activities can put me in a better mood, and a lot of that is walking, exploring. I've rediscovered my love for photography, especially for nature photography, and so it's been such a cool journey like that. But I think I would be wrong to not say that it's not as easy as I would hope. Sometimes when I'm in a bad mood or I'm going through something, I still forget to return to these spaces. I have also tried things like meditation that has worked really well for me, but every once in a while I still forget that that is a tool. And so I've learned that it does take a lot of patience. Whereas previously, in my life, I have not really practiced that slow growth. So for me, I know what works for me, and I still make the mistake of not coming outside regularly and spending that 10 to 15 minutes a day outside. It's an easy thing to do, but I find that it's not simple, whereas it has a lot to do with our access. It has a lot to do with our exposure. It does take a lot of being mindful and doing things in a meaningful way. So, I think with this pursuit of outdoor education, I think exposure is a huge thing, because, you're not just going to walk into a classroom space and be like, we are going to spend this amount of time outside. I'm going to plan for this. I'm going to bring in speakers. Like, it just doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with like a slow exposure process where it's a slow exposure process where, you have to think about how you can slowly incorporate it into your daily life, but then as a teacher, incorporate it into the daily life of your classroom. So a lot of it is modeling. And so I am still on this journey of figuring out what my role is in forwarding outdoor education. And there's a lot of times in the classroom where I could have had opportunities to easily take a class outside or bring something in, or bring in something like an Indigenous perspective, and there's times where I still forget to do that. And this is something that I focus on every day, all day. I spend a lot of my spare time reading about outdoor education, and even for me, it's a difficult thing to try and do. And so that's why I like to look at it as part of a spectrum, where it can mean existing schools can spend 10 to 15 minutes more outside with students to have the benefits of health and well-being, practicing mindfulness and those types of things. But there's also the other end of the spectrum where we can create more outdoor education spaces in classrooms. So that's another big piece, and I just want people to find where they fit on this spectrum of commitment to outdoor education. And there's big ways, there's small ways, and I just want people to know that they have the power to incorporate and to expose students in so many different ways, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. You just need to start, and that's been a big realization for me, is that I want to just commit to this in such a big way, but part of it is a process and a journey, and I'm still in the early stages of my work and my career. And so I want to start with working with students and finding out what parts of the outdoors do they enjoy, and where are the gaps, and where are the opportunities to further outdoor education. And so a lot of it is trial and error, and I think a lot of it is being a little bit experimental and pursuing different opportunities to get outside. So it's not a clear-cut path to incorporating education. And for me, like, there is a dire need with the climate crisis and a lot of the things that we're seeing. Like, outdoor education provides a lot of benefits because it helps create environmental stewards and innovators and leaders. So there's so many benefits, and so I just have this urge to hop right into it. But it does take time. But my goal is to have a starting point for myself and be able to spread and share information and resources to anyone and everyone that is willing to be open and to listen and to share. It would be, I feel like, ignorant of me to not discuss that there are already a plethora of opportunities and organizations, and there are a lot of ways that schools are doing some really remarkable work in terms of outdoor education. And I think a big thing too with our schools now, with having a huge focus on incorporating Indigenous voices and perspectives, and as we see that grow and advance, I feel like the land-based learning is really tied to that. So there are so many opportunities for overlap and crossover, and taking on new and different perspectives to how we approach teaching and learning. So for me, another big piece of this is stepping outside of the four walls of the traditional classroom and thinking about even just spending more time outside of your school by having an outdoor classroom at your school, or a garden, or a space where students can be a little more hands-on and learn. And there's just so many opportunities in that case. I think one thing that I would ask is people to reimagine what our schools can look like. So during the pandemic, when schools moved online, a lot of people had to adapt and switch up, and it totally changed how we view the delivery of education. It showed that we didn't need to be in a classroom environment, and face-to-face does play a very important role. But I just think it really totally showed us that we can have spaces that exist that are different than the traditional classrooms that we see, year in and year out. And so for me, an outdoor classroom space kind of allow a community to be kind of like this, serves as this third teacher. And that's something that really exists in Reggio schools and the Reggio philosophy about even in a traditional classroom, having your windows open and having the blinds open and allowing that to be a part of the space. And also by having things like plants and earth tones, and those things can also have a huge impact. And so, but also having, complete physical spaces where we can go to and we can teach and we can learn and we can interact with our classmates, our teachers, our environment, community members. That is such a valuable thing, and community as a classroom is such an important role. And I remember growing up that a lot of the things that I do remember from my school experiences are either tied to a field trip, or tied to an experience, or tied to a project where I got to explore something and conduct my own research. So an outdoor classroom has a lot of benefits in that way. But being outdoors just provides a space for creativity to flourish, for students to uncover their own questions and inquiries about the world around them. It fosters engagement and a connection with nature that we can't replicate. And it's just so important that kids spend a lot of time outdoors for their health, but also for their learning and their well-being. And we know that outdoor spaces provide a lot of those key things, like getting outside, getting sunlight, getting oxygen. Spending time around trees has been known to boost people's spirits and their immune systems. And it builds a lifelong relationship between the learner and the spaces. And as we know, everything comes from nature, everything comes from the earth. And so the better understanding that students have of that, the more capable they are to see patterns and connections, and to be innovators, and to be leaders, and to make decisions that benefit everyone and benefits our surroundings and makes us a part of the world around us instead of separate. And it allows learning to actually grow and thrive instead of just being this default thing where students are just subjected to spending time in one space doing worksheets over and over, whereas they can kind of become conductors of their own learning. And in that way, it's a little bit connected to Montessori and some other educational philosophies, but it really does have such a huge benefit. We know that by providing students with hands-on opportunities, they can come up with some really amazing things. And if you've ever spent time with young people outside, they have so many questions. They start to notice things that maybe you typically wouldn't notice on the day-to-day. And that's them learning from their environment and from learning from the plants, learning from the animals. And there's so many things that we can learn about collaboration and teamwork and creativity, and also about supporting each other from our surroundings. I know that I have learned a lot about the world and how it works more than I ever have, and I through having land-based experiences with elders and Indigenous people and spending some time outside, I've started to pick up and know things, and I've learned more about nature and our environment and climate change and some of the biggest issues that we're facing in our world. But I've also learned a lot about myself and the role I play. So I just think it's like incredibly important that we expose students to the outdoors and allow them to find their own interests and passions, and to be a little bit more engaged and active in the learning process. It allows teachers to step back a little bit and become more of a facilitator and be able to provide students with resources for them to tap into the things that they're interested in. Another big thing for me is that to ensure that students are supported and that they can be themselves. And I find when I'm outside in a park, I feel less judged by the surroundings, and that I'm able to set into myself. And for students to be encouraged to express themselves and to share their own ideas, it just promotes this sense of freedom that I think is so beneficial to the growth of our students and for their learning. And so that's another really important and critical piece, that we can build an inclusive space outdoors because the outdoors is already inclusive. And I think another thing that outdoor education has the opportunity to do is to provide access to communities that may not be able to access or experience the outdoors on a normal day-to-day basis. And so that idea of access and exposure is so important. It really has shocked me to think about how many people live here in Calgary and may not have actually ever been able to travel the hour plus to see the Rocky Mountains, and that is a life-changing perspective experience. And so to be able to provide that to kids who maybe would not otherwise have that opportunity is another big important thing. And like I said, it's all about exposure, and every single person has different experiences and entry points to nature, and we want to create and foster positive experiences with that, and be able to make a difference in people's lives and expand their horizons and their opportunities. And so by creating and fostering that space outdoors, it really makes for just endless potential and opportunities. And that's another big important thing for me. I think the whole thing about this whole concept of outdoor education is that it provides entry points into some of the jobs of the future. And so we know that we're dealing with the climate crisis, and that is a problem today, and it can only be foreseen as a future problem that's only going to get worse. And so that's something that future generations are inheriting. And for me, I want to be able to give them the tools to handle and equip and combat that in many different ways. And so I'm not saying that all the pressure of solving this problem is going to lay in the hands of the future generations, because we also need to be doing our part right now immediately. But because it's only going to be a sustained problem, and I know in my time working in nonprofit that there are numbers showing that hundreds of millions of people are going to be displaced globally because of climate change in the next few years. And so those are the types of things I want students to start to think about, and be able to be creative and come up with innovation and ideas and strategies to combat things, because some of the jobs of the future are going to be tied to a lot of the problems and being able to solve a lot of these problems moving forward. So that's why it's really important to create environmental stewards that no matter what industry you get in, whether it's engineering, whether it's being a doctor or working in medicine or being a scientist or working in a nonprofit or creating your own startup or whatever it may be that you choose, that these foundational skills of collaboration and being innovative and thinking about the environment and thinking about connections, that's a universal thing that's going to help you in any job or position. So I think it's important that students have that time to work together to come up with solutions for different problems, to delve into different issues, and to see how our connection to nature can be a part of a lot of our solutions, a lot of our research, and a lot of the work we do moving forward. So that's a really important thing for me, that students are able to collaborate and work on these projects and to actually get out and explore and see the real impacts of our actions, and to not just talk about it, but for them to experience it, for them to see it tangibly. That's a huge piece. And whether it's studying plants or observing weather patterns or conducting experiments, like all of that has potential to give students the tools to do so many different jobs that will hopefully make the world a better place moving forward. And so the combination of the outdoor setting and the ability to do their own research, to come up with their own opinions, to observe and see things for themselves, that is so huge to creating a vibrant classroom or learning community and experiences. And for me, I think just that fostering that intellectual curiosity allows and empowers students to become active participants in their own learning journey. And for me, that's just so important and critical. And I know whenever I've had the opportunity to do projects that align with some of my interests or the things that are going on in the world around me, like learning about current events and incorporating different experiences that I've had, that to me was always my most valuable learning experiences. Another important piece of this is shifting perspectives. And I have really had my eyes open to the different approaches that we have outside of the dominant culture / Western worldviews, whereas research is not something that's so clear cut, and there are always different perspectives. And for me, a big part of that is Indigenous perspectives, because of how closely that aligns with the interconnectedness of all things. And so to teach students how to incorporate their learning in this wholeness approach of social, emotional, intellectual, physical, and ensuring that your teaching and lessons all align and tap into those different areas, it really benefits all students of all different learning styles all at once, and can also help create a lot of really important learning opportunities, and it allows students to make their own connections. And so by incorporating this, it forwards this idea of indigenization, decolonization, and pursuing truth and reconciliation when we actually meaningfully connect Indigenous perspectives and lifestyles, and also their teachings and connections to the land. It can really expand the way that we learn, how we approach things, how we think differently about our place in the world, and that we are not separate, we are connected, and that everything that we use, everything that we do, everything that we consume comes from nature. And that's why we need to take care of it, because it's a part of us. Outdoor education provides this blank slate where anything is possible. So I think it does provide opportunities that you can incorporate different perspectives, and also bring in different experts and people who have different perspectives, and to not just learn from people, but to learn from the surroundings. And there are a lot of neat things that you can discover when you're outside. And so as the world becomes more problem solving based, and more innovative, it provides a lot of opportunities to step outside of our comfort zones, to see things differently, to take that break, to reflect, to build, to do all of these things to build those skills. And also the workplace is becoming more and more highly collaborative, and so being outdoors can also foster those collaborative and communication skills as well. There's so many potential for team building and for group projects, and that's another big thing that the workplace is transitioning towards that. And so as the world shifts and evolves, our classrooms can do that as well, to be able to teach and foster the skills that are going to help people be successful moving forward into their career. And so ultimately, we want to create lifelong learners. By doing that, we need to shift and adapt our approaches to kind of be more inclusive, to be more open, to be willing to adapt and shift and change as things move along. And so that's a really big piece for our schools, to have that consciousness that things are changing, and the schools and our approaches and our viewpoint on teaching students about their wellness, teaching them about how they learn, how to conduct research, how to ask questions, how to push back, how to do things differently, how to think outside the box. And to really essentially, it comes down to thinking outside the box means that you have to be learning and teaching outside the box. And when you think about a classroom, it's a box, and a lot of great learning does happen there. But imagine, as we incorporate more of getting outside, incorporating more of those teachings even inside the classroom, it just expands things beyond. And anytime that you can give students the opportunity to interact, to engage, to inquire, I feel like that's always going to be a better educational experience. And that is so important to me, especially at this stage in my life and in my career. There's a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass that I really wanted to share, because I feel like that book has had a huge impact on me and my personal pedagogy, but also it just really speaks to this really unique perspective coming from an Indigenous woman and scientific researcher. So it says that being naturalized to a place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters. To take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do. So that really speaks to me about just getting to the nitty-gritty of why this is such important work and why this exposure is important. It really does have a connection to space, to community building, and to going back to some of the basics while also advancing some of the newest things we know about research about the outdoors and about where we're headed as a world and a society. And so for me, the biggest thing is I think we need to look at restructuring our approaches and having multiple channels and entry points into outdoor education. That's why I really want us to look at this spectrum of outdoor experiences and exposure and think about the ways that we can advance that, whether that's, you're learning about poetry in a poetry unit and going back to the root of things like haikus, which are can be written about anything, but do have a strong relationship with nature and writing about nature, and thinking about how you can take a class outside and have them write about some of the different things that they're seeing and experiencing. And so there is a spectrum that you can incorporate this for a small amount of your day, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where we need to start to build outdoor schools. And they exist here in Calgary, they exist in Alberta, they exist in Canada, and they have had great success. They are amazing educational spaces. And so we need to further that. We need to replicate some of the things that are working well. We need to continue to push, to grow, to see things differently. When you think about most institutions outside of education, they evolve, they grow, they're trying to meet the demands of their consumers. And I think it's time that our schools really think about how we can build actual spaces that set kids up for success. And that is in their physical well-being, their mental health, their mental well-being, and also to be able to grow intellectually. And everyone is growing at different paces. There are so many ways that we can approach this. I just want to start the conversation. I want to continue to have the conversations. I know that I have so much to learn moving forward. I know that some things I try are not going to work, and they're not going to work for every student, but I want to be able to try. I want to be able to continuously learn and grow myself. I want to diversify my approaches. I want to encourage students to be advocates and stewards for a better world. And ultimately, I want people to be lifelong learners. I want them to love their world. I want them to love their surroundings. I want them to love their environment. And I want them to love the community that they're a part of. And there are so many learning communities that do such a great job of supporting and fostering student growth. And I think we just need to continue working slowly, chipping away at how we can make changes for the better that are research-based, fact-based, and are also somewhat experimental in terms of trying new things and finding out what works and challenging what our educational experiences have been in the past, what worked from that, but also how do we move forward. And for me, that's just incredibly important that we continue to have these conversations.